I find even with our associates or some of our newer doctors starting out, I'm sitting them down and stating, I can't teach you how to become a better clinician. That's not my skill set. But what I can help you with is your communication skills, what you're saying to the patient and how you say it to get them to say yes to treatment. You do that effectively, everything's going to change.
Hey there, dental economist. If you're a dentist owner or a leader within a dental business thinking about growing production, case acceptance, patient and staff satisfaction, positive outcomes, and everything else that comes with running a dental business, then you're a dental economist, and you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Dental Economist Show. We're meeting at the intersection of profit and purpose as I sit down with dental leaders who share their stories about dentistry, business, and growth. Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Before we dive in, a quick reminder, if you're enjoying the show, be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a review. Wherever you consume your podcasts, your support helps us bring insights to growth-minded dental professionals everywhere. Thank you for listening. Today, we are excited to welcome Frank Semo Jr., a seasoned leader in dental operations and staffing strategy. Frank is the Chief Operating Officer at Oakwood Dental, with deep experience spanning clinical, consulting, and executive roles. His background includes over a decade at Henry Schein, where he led practice services, and he brings a unique perspective shaped both by hands-on and strategic experience across the dental industry. Frank, thrilled to have you with us today. How's everything going?
It's going well, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I was looking forward to this conversation, and I stalk everyone on LinkedIn a little bit before we have the conversation. And I found it interesting. It looks like your career is kind of, in some ways, gone full circle, but maybe take us back. How did you get into dental in the first place? Walk us through a little bit of your career at Schein and then how you ended at Oakwood.
Sure. Definitely a full circle moment for me recently. So I've been in dentistry since the age of 16. I was a dental assistant through high school and college. Interestingly enough, I remember in high school, you get your working papers, and I was at my pediatric dental practice at the time. And I just said, hey, can I have a job? And I didn't think I was getting into healthcare, really, or dentistry specifically. And he said, sure, go, my pediatric dentist, go get a pair of scrubs. And I thought, I'd be doing some administrative work at the time, 16 years old. And they taught me everything. I was assisting, hygiene, taking radiographs. Then I was working with the pediatric dentist. We brought on GP, ortho. So I really got to, really going a hands-on approach to dentistry, but not realizing it, also honing in on communication skills, just understanding how to speak and work with patients, so much more than just the clinical hands-on dentistry. Thereafter, considering other fields, not quite sure in that stage of life. My interns at a brokerage house. Unfortunately, when I was 18, my dad passed away, and it was a bit of a change for me in my career path in life. And I actually worked at the brokerage house that he worked at. It did fairly well, but realized it wasn't quite for me. And I said, you know what? I want to go back to dentistry. And that's how I found Oakwood Dental. A buddy of mine had a friend that worked there, and the rest was kind of history. And I thought I had known a lot as a dental assistant, but then when I went there, it really got into the expanded function. They were teaching me how to make crown and bridge impressions, making temps, really getting more into hands-on working oral surgery. So I've gotten to work in every single specialty type within dentistry as an assistant. Considering dental school, realized, I was much more interested in the business side. And then I knew my Henry Schein rep at the time. We were buying from Henry Schein. They would always come in, and I said, hey, you guys hiring? And then truly, the career was a big springboard for me there. I started out as a sales rep, one of the top rookie reps in the company, not having sold anything. And I knew dentistry. I was able to relate to the clinicians and talk to them and say, I know what a burr is. I know, if you ask me a clinical question, I can talk about it because I probably used the product. And I was just very passionate about it. So, I ended up just, staying there for a little over 11 years. It was a great opportunity. There was some departmental changes, and I had always kept in touch with Oakwood. And when I mentioned to them that I was no longer with Schein, they said, hey, don't take any job offers. You might have a couple. And I said, I didn't even think they had anything for me. And I said, sure, let's have a conversation. And they said, we're growing this thing fast and we need somebody to come help us run it. Are you interested? And I said, I've always wanted to do it. It's always been a dream of mine, really, to get on this side of the business again in this capacity. And I had to take a chance on myself, and it's been a great 7 months so far.
That's a fantastic story. So I'm curious, going back to 16-year-old Frank, Was that a spur of the moment thing, or had you like put some thought into it previously where you were like, I think this would be an interesting place to work? Or were you just kind of like a kid sitting there going like, dude, I need a job. I just happen to be here. Let me ask.
I will never forget the exact moment. I was with my mother at the time. She was with me during a visit, and she said, "You should talk to them about an opportunity." And I said, "Sure, why not?" So I have her to thank for it, and it was the best chance I took. So she must have seen something.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you actually listened to your mom, which is pretty cool at 16.
Yeah,
So
yeah, a rarity, but
absolutely. So look, so you worked for almost 12 years at Shine, and now you've moved into Oakwood as the chief operating officer. After you spend that much time on the vendor side, and now you're working on the DSO side again, when you first joined the organization, how did you decide like what you needed to prioritize and where you were going to spend your time?
sure. I've worked thankfully with many DSOs, true DSOs. I wouldn't consider Oakwood a true DSO at this point, but many emerging group practices as well. So I've gotten that hands-on experience and understanding their perspective. For me personally, the first thing I did was take a 10,000-foot view of the business. I also sat with, there's three founding partners that still practice today. And I sat with each of them and I understood their goals for the future, right? Both short term and long term. And a lot of the things I knew I would need to implement, I expected. We're at 9 locations currently. So there's certain things that you would expect. We're centralizing certain business processes. We're identifying what business needs should be outsourced, kept in-house. So all of these things I knew I would uncover. But through asking, some pretty detailed questions and seeing where they wanted to go, we then started to construct a more formal business plan. For them, and this is very common as dentists, they're working in the business, very difficult to, and I always say to work on it. So for me, I've been a value add to them and just being able to take that macro look at the business and basic things, understanding wage gap analyses, understanding, is every staff member in the right seat in the bus here? Meeting with them at the local levels, identifying where maybe we need to make some proper changes, adding new staff. For us, we've essentially rebuilt our entire tech stack already in a few months. So that I know is the foundational element of growing a business, at least in dentistry. So that's something we've been starting with and just taking it from there.
Yeah, talk a little bit about how your time at Practice Services at Shine kind of prepared you for what you're doing today and kind of built that foundation that you needed, and maybe some guidance to other folks in the industry if they had their sights set on moving into an executive leadership position at a group practice or a DSO, if you would recommend the path that you took to get there.
Sure. It's helped immensely having worked with more dentists than I can count, right? And just hearing different perspectives. There are so many differing business models within multi-location dentistry, private practice. So I've heard this before. It's probably cliche, but you've seen one group practice, you've seen one, right? There are so many. There's certain similarities, right? But for me, now I'm practicing what I've preached for so many years and seeing it in practice, right? You understand there's certain times where you want to outsource a business needs, sometimes when you want to keep it in-house. But these things really do work. So I would encourage anybody to take the CE course, listen to your manufacturer reps and the business resources that are at your disposal, because they're constantly working with so many different groups at different stages, and they see what works and what doesn't. The previous work experience has been very, very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you mentioned earlier that, you sat down with the three founding doctors. You guys have growth plans. You're kind of looking at what you want to do and where you want to be. I think people think about growth in a lot of different ways today. It can be same store growth. I had Mick Janis from Oak Point on recently, and he was talking about how they're not necessarily looking to expand into new locations currently, but they're looking to build out more operatories in a number of locations that they have. There's also people that are looking to add new sites or just bring on additional associates. How are you all thinking about growth today?
Sure. I think it starts from expanding our brand. Thankfully, we have 4 locations in Staten Island, New York. We have 5 in Central New Jersey. In Staten Island, we are one of the largest providers of dentistry in the small borough that is Staten Island. For us, I think there's acquisition. Historically, we actually completed our first acquisition this year since I've joined. The practices previously have been de novo and just partnering with other dentists locally that they've worked with as associates that have been looking to expand their careers, and they've grown that way. But now the plan, especially with the staffing shortage that exists, we all know, around the country. I think acquisition is a great play for us. It changes the model just a bit, but I think our goal is to be very strategic, taking it slow. Now, we want to make sure the foundational elements are there before we start to expand and replicate. But yes, we certainly want to expand the footprint right now in Jersey and keep that going.
Now, when you talk about growing methodically over time and doing it in a de novo model, it feels like you have a lot of control over culture and the approach that the practices are going to take and the operating model within each location. You start to acquire, and it opens up some unique challenges where you're now bringing folks that were already established, that you're not kind of building from the ground up, into the fold and into the Oakwood culture, if you will, for lack of a better term. How do you think about integration of practices, and what do you think some of the biggest challenges are that you're looking out for when you're pursuing the acquisition strategy?
So it's a great question. I think with any acquisition, you have to have that business plan prior to doing so. If it's your first or your 30th, right? You have to make sure that the staff will embrace what you are about to change. Naturally, there will be some change that occurs within the business. You've likely prepared a pro forma and understood how you can grow that business, i.e. same-store growth. Yes, you want to grow production, collections, reduce expenses. With your size and capacity, you might be able to do that in some ways. But I think it goes deeper beyond just doing a traditional appraisal of a practice. The doctor who might be ready to sell, he or she can state that. But if they plan to stay on, they will never fully be ready for the change that will come into going from being an autonomous business leader to now having naturally to report to someone, right? So things will change naturally there. So it all comes down to the pre-work, really having constant meetings with the staff, with the doctors. For us, we have taken the approach of, we don't really want to change too much. Did this just this week. I sat with the staff in their recent practice we acquired. I said, guys, I don't make any decisions based on just our reasoning or rationale. It's up to you. We're in this together. You've been living and breathing within this facility for so long, and we need you to be a part of that. So you have to really embrace the team, expect the challenges, expect the attrition. It might occur. That's okay. But you have to be prepared for it. What happens if we experience it, you lose a star hygienist that's been with you for years in an environment where it's very difficult to find another? How do you prepare for that? So it really comes down to the pre-work.
It's a great question. How do you prepare for that? And I know that those sort of things happen. And you mentioned that staffing right now is still very much a challenge within the industry. It has been since COVID, and there's no signs of that kind of letting up. What's your approach there?
Sure. In the case of hygiene, naturally, like many, we've taken to some temp models as well. For us, we're privileged to have locations that are nearby. So we've accommodated some schedules with some of our current staff, bringing them there. I would call that a patch, right? Because for now we're doing it, but we're still actively recruiting for new staff. And we've had the conversations with our associates that are at this practice stating, take some time and do some pro fees, right? And that's okay. They're still growing in their careers. You're building rapport with the patient. That's the best exam you're ever going to do and the best patient you will acquire because they're likely to stay with you. They're very close to their hygienist. They see them every 6 months. So that's a model that many dentists across the country have taken. I belong to all these Facebook groups. You see practices that don't have hygiene at all. I don't believe that's a model that we will, eventually utilize, but it's working. So it's a pivot until you can have that level of permanence with finding a staff member that will be with you for the long term.
Now you mentioned, kind of the cliche comment that we've all heard, you've seen one, which holds some truth. And then there's also always kind of exceptions there as well at the foundational level. But when you explain to somebody else what is the kind of ethos of Oakwood, what your model is, what would that be?
I think it really, what I've seen since, they started out in 2006, and for them, the culture they built is, I would say, exceptional in that they truly believe in just providing the best level of care that they can to their local community. I mean, all the staff, they truly feel like part of that. So they're focusing on the mission and vision at hand. That is really built, what is Oakwood today. And it's been the backbone of insurance-based practice, which is acceptable for us and what we want to continue to do. For us in Staten Island, it's been growing the practice with our union workers, blue collar workers, the police, firemen, local city workers. That's been a foundational element of what we've done. And thankfully, for good reason. They have not done that much in marketing. The referral campaigns naturally has just grown exponentially. We're seeing it now as we've expanded into New Jersey. Patients follow us, they refer friends and family. So I think you just have to continue to focus on why you're here, what your mission and vision is. And they've taken an approach, a very conservative approach to acquisition, which I'm a firm believer in. And I think now we've become a bit more aggressive because we know what we're capable of and we know what we want to do. But we just want to keep the foundational elements of what's grown Oakwood for years, and we want to continue to grow that.
I love the community element and really kind of focusing and leaning in on the community. And it's an interesting observation that it hasn't been driven through significant marketing. It's been a byproduct of providing excellent care and having word of mouth. We talk a lot in the space about how there's 50% of the population that still don't see a dentist. When you think about capacity within your practices and within your organization, do you feel that is it still where it's not a demand issue? It's an optimization of every patient that comes into the practice, and that there's really no shortage of those. So the growth has to take place in providing better care. How do you think about that?
You had asked a question earlier that ties nicely into this as well about the prior experience and having worked with other practices. I believe this truly to be a national issue. It's not always, do I need new patients? I would say that almost every single day. Yes, there is a need to meet the attrition that you naturally will have in a business. The statistics that I've always seen really hold true in Oakwood as well. There's nothing different there. We have new patients coming in, but right now at this point it's a reactivation. I wouldn't call it a problem, but that's the focus, right? Making sure at the foundational level, are you answering every single phone call that comes in? What's taking place on those phone calls when they're scheduled? What is that experience like? As simple as it might be, are they booking that next prophy? Are they booking restorative treatment and showing up? You have to have those systems in place. For us, I can promise you it is not a new patient issue. We currently have full schedules. It's a matter of the optimization of that patient, maximizing care. It's always going to be an issue. Overcoming my insurance doesn't cover it, so that means I don't need it. That's not the case. I find even with our associates or some of our newer doctors starting out, I'm sitting them down and stating, I can't teach you how to become a better clinician. That's not my skill set. But what I can help you with is your communication skills, what you're saying to the patient and how you say it to get them to say yes to treatment. You do that effectively, everything's going to change.
Dive into that a little bit more, like the building of trust with patients in a practice, the retention of the patients, and the building that connection. What's some of the guidance that you provide to people to help them, strengthen those, bonds that they have between the practice and patients?
Sure. In full transparency, because I think it's helpful, I can relate to so many viewers that you probably have. Many of the reviews, we have a slew of good ones, some great ones, but some of the poor ones you will get over time. It's going to happen in any business. It's not relating to the clinical dentistry. Most of the time, it's an issue in billing. It's an issue with a mix-up or miscommunication at reception, things of that nature. So then it goes back to, is it a systems problem? Let's identify what's causing it on our side if you have this happen, right? So for me, I'm training constantly our reception team, and it starts with patient experience from that first phone call. So what is being said? How is it being said? How are they communicated to remind them to come in? And then when they're here, it starts from the second they open the door. What do they, see? How does the practice smell? Right? How does it look? Like all of it matters. You have to really cater to all the senses and give them the best experience, because that's what the patient's going to tell their friends. They're not going to say the margin on the crown prep was amazing. They're going to say that it was a great, clean office, a very accommodating staff. And I would go back. I would refer my friends and family there.
Frank, you've been kind of immersed in dental for longer than most people from a younger age. You've seen a lot of changes over that course of time. What are some of the things that you look at the space now and you go like, these are challenges that maybe didn't exist before? And what are some of the things where you look at the industry as a whole? So like, here's some tailwinds that are actually working in our favor.
Sure. I think we have to accept the reality on a national scale that insurance and being in network with a payer is not going away. You see, you belong to many Facebook groups, you hear the amazing stories of being able to go out of network, and that's acceptable for some business models, some it is not. With ours, and if it is your model, accept the fact that a patient might wait for a pre-D to come back to book their appointment, right? Make sure it's booked, and then they'll come back when they know what their out-of-pocket expenses might be. Embrace that model. right? And I think understand that naturally there is a bit of a commoditization of dentistry. It's a, for good reason, a competitive environment. The patients understand that they could seek their dentistry somewhere else. And in a difficult economy for many, in an age where everything is at a patient's fingertips from consumer behavior, they're constantly being guided to spend their money elsewhere, putting dentistry on the lowest rung of the ladder, right? So you have to create value in that moment. You have to be able to say, you need to and create urgency. You need to do this today, and here's why. Because those dollars will be captured by another competitor, and it's not a dentist. It's the store down the road, and we have to understand that.
And what do you think are some of the things that you're seeing today that make you still the bullish on dentistry? Where you're like, hey, this is a good place to be. I've been here a long time, but I'm looking forward to being here for much longer. Well, what are some of the things that you enjoy the most about it?
I think for us, there is so much stability in this field. I think we constantly, while there is a difficulty in staffing at this point, it's for good reason. The hygienist today can throw a resume out there and get a job immediately and have a full book of business. We see that even with our associates. Just hired an associate recently. The schedule's already near full for weeks and weeks to come. So there's stability, there's longevity here, and the patients really do appreciate what you're doing. Now being yes, a large organization for what we are, you feel the changes, right? In this, every time we make a change, there's a positive one, and the patients feel it, the staff feels it. So you get to help just so many people. And if that's what you're in this business for, it really, really makes a difference.
You mentioned earlier that when you first joined, one of the things that you did was evaluate kind of the technology ecosystem that you had across your organization. Why was that important? What were you looking for? And what's been your strategy as it relates to technology adoption?
You asked about what we have to change in this day and age and what I've seen. And what I'm bullish on is you have to embrace the new tech that's out there, and everything revolves around the PMS, right? The practice management system, and understanding within that practice management software, what third-party systems integrate the best. Like I said, it's important on patient experience. So what we did initially, changed our phone system, understood and consulted. I always encourage previous clients to consult your vendors and say, who plays best in the sandbox. We were strategic in who we chose as the phone provider because we knew it integrated well. We are adopting AI technology, reading our radiographs, helping submit those images to the insurance payers to reduce denials and rejections. All of it matters. So we're also looking at automation. As it sounds like we should probably have had this already, but just automation and digitizing our patient forms, medical history, updating how we communicate to patients, all of those things matter. And by making one small change, you're going to save your reception team hours, and it's going to happen for us in maybe a month. So that's what I'm really excited for. And the efficiency is going to skyrocket.
Yeah. Do you find that the teams and the practices are excited about making changes like that? You mentioned a lot of things there. There's a lot going on with radiographic AI. Sometimes there's some friction there with providers that have been, dentists for a very long time, thinking that it's not necessary. You mentioned going into digital forms, which as a patient, I love because I hate the clipboard with the pen. And I think the front desk also hates having to retype all that stuff in anyways.
Very much.
There's all these opportunities, but it can feel, I think, in the practice overwhelming when it's kind of all coming together at one time. How do you navigate that?
It is challenging, 100%. I think you really have to be, especially in a leadership position in the business, you have to be an active presence in every location, if you can, depending on the number of locations you have, or just find some way to communicate, or with your management team, utilizing them and delegating that same communication. I think they have to embrace the change, but I have not painted the prettiest of pictures here. I've told them that there's going to be bumps in the road, but you have to show them the light at the end of the tunnel. You have to explain the why, and you have to get them on board with the mission and the vision. That also sounds cliche, but they have to see what the intention is. And when they see that the team is really, truly working to better the practice, but I say this all the time, my job is not to work for the patient, that's your job. I'm here to work for you. And I know that if I create an amazing experience for you at work, it's going to trickle down into a quality patient experience. So that's why we want to automate, because what I saw in observing in the first month or two were the inefficiencies and the stress that the front team had, that the back office team had. So by utilizing the technology, we're going to fix all those problems. And I'm telling them that. And they see it and they appreciate it. So they just have to really be in the know. I can't tell you how many practices I've worked with that the staff has no idea how the practice is doing. That means they're just going and working a 9 to 5, collecting a paycheck. You have to communicate with them and make them, they're truly part of the growth, and they have to know that.
It really does all start with the why. And it seems like one of the more obvious things, but I find myself throughout the course of every week of work going, I missed sharing the why in this particular case, or I didn't share it with this person, or something comes back up and you're like, wait, we didn't foundationally lay the groundwork here and tell the story of what's going to happen. Why do you think it's such a hard thing to do well consistently?
I think specific to dentistry, there's, in most offices, you have dentists, and rightfully so. They enter this profession and they are so laser focused on working on their patients and providing the best quality care. These other key components often get missed. Hence why you find that communication is not always the strongest suit. Why it's something that, we're constantly seeking education on, because the clinical care has always been top of mind, as it should be. But I think just running the day to day and just being so laser focused in the business, you just overlook these key things that really make a difference. That's why you need to outsource. Even, it's like in my position, you have to have somebody that's going to constantly remind the team, remind the leaders of why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing.
Now, does your approach to explaining the why, does it start with the dentist in the practice? Is it an office manager? Do you kind of have engagement with both at the same time? How do you most effectively make sure that the message is being communicated across an individual practice within your organization?
Sure. For me personally, at 9 locations, I'm still able to be nimble enough where I can be a presence. Delegation is hard, even for me, and I'm still working now on building that infrastructure of regional management. We're still not there, and it's growing. So being able to dictate that message to them, for them to then, do it at the more local levels. But I'm meeting with teams regularly. I've committed to all of them that they're constantly going to see me as a presence. And when I'm there, I'm having one-on-one meetings, I'm having departmental meetings, and it's always an agenda point. Even if we're talking about something else, we're always diving into the future growth. And believe it or not, it comes as a surprise to some. It did in the very beginning. That meeting I just had this week with the practice that we acquired, they've never done that. It was brand new to them. But you can see that it worked because you just see the body language, the questions, the hand raises. They were huddled around asking great questions. I had concluded the meeting. We went to the front desk. I was talking to a staff member. They followed. Right? They were asking questions again. So they just have to see that you're a believer in the cause, and you just have to always remind them in every capacity possible.
Do you do any type of broader communication cadence where you bring all of the practices together, either virtually or anything like that at this point? Or is it still very much a office by office approach?
We've done it once so far. I will tell you, and many practices will attest, it is difficult because we have office hours every day, and it's very difficult to close the office. I would urge, and even urge our partners, and I would say this, you have to make that investment sometimes. So close up shop and make the investment in training and education because it matters, and there will be an ROI in doing that. Although it might not seem it up front, there will be an ROI there. Maybe you can't track it right away, but it's going to work. So the answer in short is no, we haven't yet, but we're going to continue to expand it.
Yeah, I had Dr. Samzarabi from Rodeo Dental on last year. I think they have 35 plus locations now. And I really appreciated before I had him on, he goes, do you want to come to our morning town hall, which was happening the day before? And they had all their practices on Zoom and they have a very unique culture at Rodeo. So they were all had neon lights and they were all dressed up in costumes and stuff in all the rooms. But it was a neat thing to watch. And a really, I think, hard thing to build. I think one of the challenges that I see in dental groups is carrying culture across practices that all operate kind of independently. Is that something that's even important? Or is it okay to have kind of each practice have their own unique type of culture, and then you have the culture that's built with the leadership organization across the top?
Even I would say in my days at Henry Schein, they had an amazing culture. They still do. And you would go to every local region and it had its own culture, its own team. And that is okay. And you can replicate that in any business. You take it to dentistry. Locations look similar in nature, design is somewhat similar, but every staff is different. And you kind of have to be a chameleon when you go in and adapt to that person's communication or behavior style. And every office almost has its own goals, right? Some might be growing, some might be declining slightly in some departments. So you kind of have to cater to the need. But I'm very okay with each office being unique, because that's what builds culture and builds the team. You want to make it fun. In many cases, that's their home base and will only be their home base. They're not going to other locations in many cases. So totally fine. But you have to, going back to the beginning of our conversation, you have to build that foundation and culture. And once that message is there, everything else, will carry. So they know the why, they know what we're doing and the mission there. But it's okay if you have your own subculture, I would say, in that local practice.
Yeah, going back to some of the technology piece, you'd made a comment about automation being important. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is that all these tasks that have to be done in a dental practice repetitively, which there's many of them, whether it's posting or entering in the data from a patient form or this or that, or the calling and getting insurance data and entering that. And I don't think any of those things are the reason that people enjoy their jobs. And so the ability to start to strip those out of your organization and of your practices, aside from creating a lot of efficiencies, I think will ultimately, for the practices that are successful at doing it, create a better working environment for their teams, which could ultimately lead to better retention, less turnover, and being kind of a more attractive place to work. Is that something that you've put much thought into as you're kind of contemplating the labor challenges and the other things that are taking place in the space today?
Fortunately and unfortunately, we're dealing with it every single day. And I see it now in the very beginning when I started at Oakwood, and observing, you understand what is stressing the staff. And some of the mundane tasks, such as, I'll call it mundane, some individuals love doing it. Insurance eligibility, a lot of those traditional forms, having to get a medical history, having to get all the patient updates. These things take a lot of time. I will tell you, one of the first things I did was outsource eligibility. We had already outsourced billing, but we then gave eligibility to that team. There was a lot of resistance to that. But what I found was that there were many hands in the pot, if you will, and you want to be able to manage. And I would urge every single dental practice to do this: manage your vendors like your employees. They are not going to be perfect. I think you sign up with these companies, you expect perfection. It is not the case. Things will happen. As much as you prepare for success, you have to prepare for the mistakes and the failures, right? So manage them as if they're on your team truly. And it's been a great transition. We have taken eligibility completely off the place of the staff. And the biggest ask is, great, you now have more time. Focus on revenue generating tasks. Calling that unscheduled lists, calling your patients, reading your patients, booking next appointments, that matters. You fill the schedule, sales kills all problems, right? So looking at it from that standpoint, you have to make sure the schedule is full and your patients are happy. That's really what I think they like doing. They like talking to people. So that's what it comes down to.
So what was the resistance for that? Where did that come from? Was it a fear that somebody was going to do it less well than they would? Or, what did that stem from?
Yes. And I think the fear of mistakes and the fear of, or the inability to delegate, right? I think we've done it this way for so many years. We maintain some level of control. And if we give it away, they're just going to mess it up, right? For lack of a better term. Guess what? That's okay, right? Because that's how you grow. And you can't scale if you continue to do the same thing as you were. It worked to get to this point. But now if the plan is to continue acquisition, you have to give some things up and focus on the revenue generating opportunities.
What's your general view on like centralization of services versus outsourcing versus having practices handle themselves? What areas do you think just need to stay within the practice? What areas can you hand off? What's your philosophy there?
I think outsourcing is an absolute must. And I think even at larger scales, you see nowadays more DSOs continuing to do that. Even if at some point, I mean, of course, it makes sometimes financial sense to have an employee on salary to do it. But I think outsourcing billing makes 100% sense. Your verification, we're exploring, outsource call centers. I think you'll see this too, a hybrid model where you have some employees that remain in practice at a corporate location, and then you have auxiliary staff in an outsourced capacity. But I think removing as much administrative function, my ultimate goal is when you walk into a dental practice, it should be fairly silent. You want to see an empty waiting room because you want efficient scheduling. You want to see that phone not really ringing that much, more outgoing than incoming. Because if it's incoming calls, my staff cannot accommodate the patient, right? So you want to take all of that out of the practice. So some of my initial goals have been enhancing call center, enhancing our billing department, and just taking all of, like I said, the administrative function out.
It's a great perspective. I don't think I've heard somebody frame it quite in that way before about you want to see an empty waiting room. You don't want to hear the phones ringing. Like these are actually benefits and signs of a well-run practice versus the hectic noise, full waiting room. Everyone's just an uncomfortable experience for a patient. So I like that a lot. Separate and apart from staffing, which we know is an enormous challenge. If there was one problem that you wish could be solved, either by technology or other means, where do you think the biggest kind of like friction point still is in a dental practice?
I think it 100% comes down to insurance management, the revenue cycle process, right? And, one of the biggest struggles that we see, and I see it a lot, is timely clinical notes, getting that absolutely correct. Because we see, everything right now is pretty much auto adjudicated. So, and it's becoming more and more aggressive, I believe, and I've heard this. I don't know if you can attest. The traditional narrative is likely going to go away. I think you will see more continued automation. So, but there also has to be automation within the practice. I can appreciate automated RCM by the payer, but we have to have improved technologies to just streamline that process to get doctors paid faster. Dental benefits have not increased, I think, ever. You're looking at 1,500 to 2K, right? Which is candidly not fair, right? But why should it be such a challenge to provide that quality care and then get paid? Sometimes 30, 60, 90 plus days at no fault of the practice. So there has to be constant improvement in that system.
What do you think about membership plans? I'd be curious as to your perspective, because I've heard some people say like, look, the membership plan that I can buy is actually better than the dental insurance that I would get from my employer. And so I've seen a lot of traction being made there. I'm admittedly not an expert on it, but I'd just be curious as your viewpoint.
You certainly have to be careful of the company you choose to do it. You want to make sure it's compliant with the insurance contracts if you're in network, even out. But I'm a firm believer in it. We actually have one that we utilize. We have a stronger and growing percentage of patients that are utilizing it as well. I think part B of it comes down to patient financing. I see that as a struggle as well. And also it comes down to communication within the practice. Can your team effectively sell it? And I'm going to say sell it because it's one thing to say Dr. Jones's discount plan. What is it and why do I need it? But then what happens if there's a out of pocket that's a few $100? May seem nominal to some, but if I can't pay for that, what are my options? And how do you get me to say yes today? It's amazing. I had one patient recently just asked to extend her payment plan to 3 weeks instead of 2. Sent me a thank you card in the mail. We didn't use any third-party financing. We just did it ourselves. You have to be able to make those accommodations, but you have to, if you brand it right and you communicate it well, I think it's a big one in dentistry.
Yeah, as a software vendor, I always just imagine the struggle if you are a membership plan provider, because you have to rely on the folks in the practice to be successful selling the plans. And so you're kind of, as the provider of those plans or the facilitator, the software provider, however you want to think about it, your hands are tied a little bit. Do you find that the staff embraces, that they see the value in providing them to patients and understand the benefit? Or is that a hard why to explain to folks?
I think overall they see it. And I mean, seeing the numbers and seeing that it's growing makes sense, which is good. It's mainly for your self-pay patients. We still are finding that many patients in network with their plan want to utilize those benefits. So it just comes down to that percentage. So it may not be as spoken to every single day, but it's a big value add. Interestingly enough, I had a patient write us a review online about a month ago. And they said, I wish you talked about this more because I feel like nobody knows about it. And the light bulb kind of went off for me. I'm like, well, we should be promoting that we have this level of service, because you may think it's common practice, but maybe not every dental practice offers it, which you find is true. They don't.
That's one of the things in any business that's so challenging is you make these assumptions when you're breathing, sleeping every day that everyone knows what you know. And half the time it's not the case. And you have to repeat over and over to kind of, end up getting the adherence across an organization or the awareness. For yourself, as you continue to kind of embark upon your career, where do you go to learn? Like, how do you stay up to speed on what's happening in the industry? And then maybe just even from like a professional growth perspective, what are some of the approaches that you take, to continue to improve?
Sure. I think it's never too early or late to find mentors, and you shouldn't just have one. You should, have many. And evaluate your mentors too. See what they've done throughout their careers, and ask a ton of questions. I mean, it sounds simple, but I constantly am doing that on my drives to the office. Most of the time, I'm not listening to music. I'm listening to podcasts like this. I'm on the phone with my dental friends, asking them how they're doing. So you just have to constantly surround yourself with like-minded individuals, and then the people that are in positions that you wish to be in one day yourself, and just constantly learn from them, and just keep making mistakes. It's going to happen. Nothing. Don't you strive for perfection. It's never going to happen. Just keep on going, and you'll learn a lot along the way.
Hey, Frank, really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS, home of Dental OS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening.